Twilight's Nightmare, Chapter 26, Part 2. The first set of places on the list proved to be nothing. They were just the sort of place where terrible things could have happened. But with the work of RGIS, things were kept down and just slightly naughty. These places were empty, like the owners had likely taken some effort in hiding themselves. The next place she had to look into was a large ally. Seeing the state of the building, she remembered that her mother wanted her to have more of a normal career. But normal careers didn't offer much cause to go out and look for hidden things. How's she gonna go on adventures or do something that actually worked towards keeping Equestria safe if she did that? Turning a corner, she saw in the peripheral vision a large earth pony with a mark of a skull under an iron hoof guarding the door.
What sort of pony has a mark like that?
She thought. The Asian moved on, showing no sign that she wished to linger. She deliberately ignored the concealed guard as if she didn't see the powerful crossbow hidden beneath a bin, but still in easy reach. It was a weapon that was most definitely not for self-defense.
Well, this place is better defended than I thought it was. But why?
She thought. She moved on, having to take a long walk to prevent whatever other guards the place might have taking her unaware. She would have to come back later to try and observe them from stealth before taking any action. She thought she would find herself quite allergic to crossbow bolts. The salty air did a lot to conceal any other scent in the air. If she wasn't trotting out on her own in the bad part of town, she would have called it a relaxing outing.
This is so much easier when...
She started to say to herself, but the sound of hooves behind her cut her words off. "Well, what's a pretty thing like you doing here?" said the large earth pony from before. Apparently, he had followed her. She smiled, and slowly walked towards him.
The question is, do you have enough bits to find out?
She asked, letting a seductive purr enter her voice. He paused for a moment, his body language eased. He clearly no longer saw her as a threat.
Good, that'll make this easier.
She thought. He moved closer. I have more than enough for you. He started leaning in close. She mirrored the movement, drawing closer as if to kiss him, and she wrapped a leg around him, pulling them closer. And then a flash-cast, point-blank, overpowered knockout spell sizzled through the air, singeing his coat. He staggered back, dazed but still standing. Sweeping his legs out from under him, she slammed a hoof into the side of his head, followed up by another pair of knockout spells.
It's a Tartarus with the pony toughness,
she thought, panting. It had only been seconds, but her heart was pounding. She was an actual spy, an investigator, not some sort of comic book secret agent. Things were not meant to go this way. She used her magic to cast a binding spell, holding all four of his legs together and dragging him to a large dumpster in an alleyway. Looking at the dumpster for a moment, she gave up and just dragged him behind it. There was no way that she was gonna get such a large pony up and over into the dumpster. To buy some more time, she gagged and blindfolded him. She hoped that the rest of the lowlives here wouldn't do more than just rob him, but she didn't have enough time to take him in. She wrapped an invisibility spell around herself, slipping soft padded shoes from her saddlebags, and put them on. The sound of muffled hooves on the pavement as she galloped back were quiet enough to blend into the background sounds of the city. On a time limit, she used a lockpick spell to break in and began to search the building the thug had guarded. The other defenders outside on the other side of the building paid her no attention as they continued the conversation about Hoofball. Fortunately, her special talent was finding hidden things as well as apparently hiding things. So she was good at locating things hidden away in secret compartments, finding secret passageways, and hiding places. Though how any pony thought they could hide all their counterfeit magic items under a floorboard was another question. All it would take would be some pony with a horn to get close to find them. She gathered up all the stuff that she could into her dimensional pocket. It was now full of stolen foods, tools, weapons, and bundles of many things she had no idea what they were. Some of it would be returned to their owners, and the rest would end up in the evidence lockup.
So likely would be taken by the Night Princess and then locked to get more disappearances from the evidence storage.
The last item she found gave her pause. They were a collection of magical writings, and just looking at them made her shiver. Despite all of her training, finding magical text scribed in blood upon the flayed skin of a pony was not something most could just ignore. She was not an expert at the sort of magic, but she could recognize that they were bad news. By how complicated they were and how large the spell array would need to be, this was probably another attack, like the one in Manhattan. A slight ripple of magic passed over her, and she tensed moving into a hiding place, despite the fact that she was invisible. Her talent at finding hiding places also served her well locating places to hide herself. "Where is Skullcrusher?" a voice downstairs called out. Agent 7 carefully and slowly made her way to the window. It was a bit of a drop, but it would be her most reliable form of escape. She could hear hooves moving around downstairs. If her ears were not lying to her, one of them was moving closer to the stairs. She lit her horn and, using Aurora, slowly started to open the window. That pulse of magic brushed over her again. She didn't recognize the spell, but you didn't have to be a Twilight Sparkle to work out when you had been spotted by magic.
Back, subtly.
she thought, lunging the few steps and diving at the still-closed window. A kinetic blast launched from her horn, shattering it and sending glass flying into the night air, shortly followed by a wingless pony. As the ground rushed towards her, she thought back to her training, and she prepared a large telekinetic blast and let it become fuzzy around the edges. She could still hear the ponies inside the building galloping about and shouting. They were heading into the room that she had just left. Unless they had any wings, all she needed to do was get to the next street and she would be safe. The deliberately faulty kinetic blast spell released from her horn, impacting the ground, and splashed back in a dispersed wave of force. She twisted her body, and started to line up her hooves to take off at a gallop upon landing, hoping that she got the power in her spell right. She hated the physical part of her training. The unknown magic pulse happened again, but this time it seemed to settle on her, her limbs starting to feel heavy, and her heart felt tight, like no matter how hard it beat, it couldn't pump enough blood. She tried to fight the spell with her own magic, tried to force her body to move, and it felt like she was gonna tear something inside with each attempt. Before she even had time to get desperate enough to see if she would tear herself apart by trying too hard, she hit her spell. Impacting the softened spell felt like falling in a jelly, as if it was made from warm air and yet still slowed you. Sinking through it, now completely unable to move, she was very glad it was magic and not the dessert. Drowning in jelly would have been very embarrassing. She settled, laying on her side in a very awkward pose. She couldn't even move her tail to preserve her modesty from the ponies that she could hear walking up behind her. She wanted to run, wanted to strike out with her magic, but she couldn't even breathe. The world started to darken, before the familiar sound of a stun bolt ripping through the air let her know what sped her descent into the dark of unconsciousness. Stryker blinked, pulling back from the agent before him. He had not expected the vision to be that intense. He placed a hoof over his heart. He could still feel the ache of the blood magic constricting the agent's blood flow, and he only wanted to know if rescuing her would interfere with her mission. Having felt everything she had been through from the first pony point of view, he now knew. The spells she had in her pocket were far more important than dealing with the ponies here. But he had no way to get them without her consent. So a rescue mission it is then. Time to play the dashing hero, and hope she doesn't buck me in the face while trying to escape my rescue attempt. Taking a deep breath to steady himself, he made ready to shadow step out of there. It was just always so much harder with a passenger. He didn't want to have to use the extra reserve of magic a Sovereign had blessed him with, but that was for a true emergency. This was just an inconvenience. Letting his power build, he wrapped his limbs around the agent. Closing his eyes, he felt the world fall out from under him as they both fell into the shadow, leaving the room, and the cultists far behind. His body was still trembling from the lack of magic. He had used a lot to get here. He was hidden in a broken clock tower. All the mechanisms about made the place look like a comic book villain's lair. He had wrapped the agent in a blanket and sat as far away from her as he could, waiting. He would need to sleep to inform his Sovereign about what happened, but knowing his luck, if he did that, she would just wake up and either flee or attack him. His aura reached out, pulling a mango from the box next to him. Ever since his change, these things had been a little too Moorish. His fangs bit into its juicy flesh, and he much preferred using his fangs on fruits instead of ponies. It was a little too personal. Using his hooves to fight was one thing, but his mouth? He guessed he would get used to it. He had seen how effective Thestral fangs could be in a fight many times before. He watched his solar guest, eating mango after mango, glad for being a unicorn. With the amount of energy a pony could burn using spells, it gave him all the justified opportunities he could possibly want to eat the fruit. Slowly, the solar agent began to stir, a groan escaping her lips. "Welcome back to the land of the free light," he said, hoping his opening would put her at ease. She slowly looked around, and he could see the edge of fear on her, but it was tempered by her training. She had already clocked the 2 exits to the room and the small pile of his weapons and armor in the corner. Good, hope she would see them. He thought knowing it would lend credibility to him being a night guard. Not that she should fail to notice his night-chosen traits.
How do you know that name, Night Lover?
She asked, her eyes staring at him. Flicking his ears in annoyance, he glared at her with his slitted eyes. "Oh, so this is the thanks I get for saving you." She started before he cut her off. "What I need to get a look at are those magical notes that you took from my targets. I know you hid them in your pocket, and I can't continue my investigation without them."
How can I trust that you're not in bed with the cultists?
Oh, for Luna's sake, we're not some Nightmare Moon cult, he said, anger flashing. At least, not anymore. He added in the privacy of his own mind. Look, do you want to save the city or let it go up in flames? In case you haven't noticed, Twilight Sparkle is not here. So unless we find out what they're gonna do with that... whatever they're gonna do, we might need to update the map of Equestria. She took a calming breath. He could see her trying to get a good read on him. Most ponies found it harder to read the emotions and honesty of Thestrals. He just wondered how much of that had carried over to him.
Fine,
she said, snatching up one of his mangoes from the box with Aurora.
So, who are you?
He tracked the stolen fruit with his eyes. It took more effort than he wanted to admit to not use a stun bolt on her to save his treat. He grabbed another from the box and took a bite out of it before the temptation became too great. Offering a casual salute with his hoof, he answered, "Striker." She nodded, her body language settling into a well-practiced professional manner. "So she is gonna be no fun, but at least if she stays civil, we should be able to work together."
So, how do you know my name?
"You do know that Celestia puts tags on her agents, don't you?" he asked, hoping that she wouldn't ask if these tags had names on them. The look of confusion that crossed her face told him that he was safe. She clearly didn't even know about them. "Look, just to make sure the Night Guard does not inconvenience any of yours that are undercover, she made sure that all of you are marked. It's one of the things that we have to check for before we do anything too permanent." Her ears lowered fractionally. "So she's another one that doesn't like what we do," he thought. "So the spell?" he asked. She lit her horn, and the pieces of cured pony skin were placed on the floor. She seemed to cringe away from them, muzzle wrinkled in disgust. Stryker walked over and took a good look at them. So what do you know about these things?" He pointed with a hoof at the spells.
Not much. I didn't get much time to study them before my little enforced nap,
she said, getting to her hooves and walking over, turning her eyes to the spell text, holding her face as if it was a mask.
I do know that you would at least need a small warehouse to fit this outer ring of runes in.
She pointed to his section. He followed where she was directing his attention to. He lamented his lack of education. Sure, he knew the spells he could cast very well. Luna had even praised him on his mastery of 2 of them. Yet when it came to magical theory, he had next to none. His eyes caught an imperfection on the surface of the pony leather the writing was on. He lit his horn, letting his magic improve his already sharp eyes, the impression of words becoming clear. 319 East ST. Remember to bring the stuff, and everything could be ready in 10 days. He grinned, showing his fangs. The foals had written a note resting atop the spell text and left an address.
What?
She asked with annoyance, glaring at his grinning face. "I know where they're going," he answered, hiding his fangs but keeping his grin.
What? How could you possibly get that from the spell?
"They leaned on it when they wrote down the address." She blinked and saw her hoof start to lift. He just knew that she almost face-hoved.
So, I got captured by a bunch of amateurs.
Well, they're evil cultists that worship Sombra, not agents. So expect crazy magic and a definite lack of common sense. She nodded slowly.
So, what do you want to do now?
"I'm glad you asked. We're gonna take a peek and see what we can see."
Just the 2 of us?
She asked in disbelief. He tilted his head and looked at her. "You want to go on your own?"
No, we need backup to deal with something like this.
She insisted. "Once we have a look and see how far they've gotten, we'll know how much and what sort of reinforcements we need." She still looked doubtful.
What makes you think that we can even do this?
"Getting places unnoticed is what the Night Guard is best at."
They managed to find me when I was invisible.
She interrupted. "Alright, so I need to worry about some sort of magical detection?" he asked, already knowing the answer from her memories.
Yes, it was a pulse of energy that I did not recognize, then they somehow used it to paralyze me.
Stryker nodded. "Alright, thanks. That'll be useful. Did you notice what sort of range it had?" She shook her head.
No, I wasn't close enough to tell how far it went.
He headed over and started putting on his armor. "So, you coming?" I have a feeling that they're going to be a great team together. Now let's get on to our good sports of donators. Top donators: TacoCat598, Peter Coldhard, J Tinman, Darkside, Gauntlet, and Only One Thing. Zar630, Strix, Raiden, Narwhals, Black Moonheart, Drake Lovedragon, Pastel Skies, Austin Rollin, Magazine, CrazyKiller557, Nike Kruger, Dospo, Madman Stan, Delta Omega, Jack Hadge, RuneScythe9852, Hudson Norman, Stephen Bingham, Michael Dale Aramore, Dash of Evergreen, Riney Dragonwolf, Ponyman, Talrasha, The Toilet Snake, Sword Brother and Mordred, Ronin Wandering, Rena Prison Man Guy, Easy, Skyochia, Leslie Prickett, Jordan Peterson, Crimson Kitten A9, Lightskin, Monster Kitty, Needs a Life, Milan Biahanek, JM, and many more amazing people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.